So you have a separate bank account for your PPP funds and you've spent it, the balance is at zero, therefore you get full forgiveness, right? Not necessarily, all right? And this is why. Today we're talking about why you gotta be careful about that. So back it on up, for those of you that are like, what do you mean my balance is at zero? So for a lot of banks that borrowed or lent money to borrowers, they had the borrowers open a second bank account and they put all the PPP funds into that second business bank account. Then they required the borrower to use that bank account to pay for their PPP qualified expenses. Remember, those 5 categories of expenses that qualify for PPP forgiveness are payroll, business mortgage interest, business rent, business utilities, and business debt interest. If this is you and you are one of those businesses who had that separate bank account, then you were tracking your spending by how much that bank account was going down in balance, right? So once you hit zero, you're probably like, I'm good, I've spent all my money, I've only spent it on qualified expenses, so I'm gonna get full forgiveness. Well, let's talk about why that might not necessarily be true. So here are a few of the common roadblocks that we're seeing as people begin to apply for their forgiveness after spending all of their PPP funds on their qualified expenses. So first, you guys, you gotta remember that you have to have at least spent 60% of those funds on payroll. We've seen banks weren't tracking payroll, so while you might have had payroll coming out of that PPP bank account, if you also had your rent and your utilities and all the other things that qualified coming out, the banks weren't watching to make sure you were staying at 60% for payroll. So there is a very good chance that you might have spent more on those other non-payroll expenses than you should have in order to get full PPP forgiveness. So what you'll need to do in this case, you guys, is run your payroll reports for the period that you're asking forgiveness for, all right? And make sure that the amount that you spent on payroll for that period equals at least 60% of your total PPP loan amount. If not, you might want to extend that period out at least another week so you have more payroll expenses, because you have to hit that 60% in payroll to even be considered for full forgiveness. So the second roadblock, you guys, is that if all of your payroll was coming out of your PPP account, then your federal payroll tax for your employer portion was included in that amount. And that is the one thing out of your payroll that isn't considered qualified for forgiveness under the PPP rules. So to tell you guys what exactly that means, so your company pays 6.2% and 1.45% in Medicare and Social Security on all the gross wages you guys pay to your employees, okay? This means that for every $1,000 in wages, in gross wages that you guys pay out as a business to your employees, you're paying $76.50 in federal payroll taxes. And those federal payroll taxes are not qualified PPP expenses. So let's put this into bigger loan terms. So if you had a $50,000 PPP loan and you used it all on payroll, okay, so $50,000 worth of payroll, then almost $4,000 of that was federal payroll taxes, which means that's not forgivable, right? It's not a qualified PPP expense. So that means you have another $4,000 to spend in PPP money in order to get your full forgiveness. So even though your PPP balance in your bank account went down to zero, as you can see, you still might have funds that need to be spent on payroll somewhere or somewhere, you know, on qualified PPP expenses in order to get that full forgiveness. And one easy way to do that is just to include one more payroll run in your PPP forgiveness paperwork, okay? So the last main roadblock that we're seeing that is preventing people from getting full forgiveness, even if they've spent all of their money on qualified expenses, you guys, is that FTE, that full-time employee, or wage reduction rules. So these FTE and wage reduction rules are really extensive, and they're too much to deal with or to talk about today. But basically, if you had to lay people off, or if you had to cut hours or cut wages or salaries to people, then there's a chance that you're not going to satisfy those FTE requirements. And unless you qualify for one of the SBA's safe harbors, which again, whole nother training we can talk about later, there's a chance that even if you spent all your money, you might not qualify for full forgiveness. So if you guys look in the library, there are a ton of videos on PPP and all things PPP. But if you are looking for a little bit more one-on-one, we actually offer personalized PPP strategy sessions. They're a 30-minute Zoom call where it's you and me, and we can talk about all of your industry and business specific questions and loan items that you want to cover to make sure that you got your bases covered and you're going to get full PPP forgiveness. Because I believe with just a little bit of strategizing, everybody can and should get full forgiveness. But it might take just a little bit of work to make sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. Finally, I also recommend downloading our awesome free PPP Tracker. Okay, this is it's an Excel spreadsheet that makes it super easy to track everything you're spending your PPP money on and make sure you're satisfying that 60% payroll, make sure you're spending all of the money on the qualified expenses, and there's even an FTE the FTE wage reduction worksheet in there as well, if that's something you're concerned about, because you have had to lay people off or cut hours or cut wages. So all of that is in there in that free PPP tracker. And there's even a how-to video. So great free resource, you guys, to get started in case this is something that you're feeling completely overwhelmed about. If you guys have any questions about what we talked about today, go ahead and leave a comment below. And then I highly, highly suggest you head on over to our Facebook community, Money, Taxes, and Finance for Small Business, because these topics are what we talk about on a regular basis and have live trainings on every week. You can access that group by clicking the link in the description box. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and while you're loving on me hard, go ahead and hit the notification bell so you never miss a future video.